Welcome to another episode of the Silman Wrestling Podcast. I'm your host, Brian Battisto. Today's guest is my former roommate, former college teammate, Chance Rich. Chance Rich was a three-time national qualifier. He finished in the round of 12. He is somebody that is now coaching at Valencia High School, and I'm super excited to share this podcast with you guys. If you haven't yet, please like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. We're on Spotify. We're on all the major social media platforms. And obviously, we got this new setup. And what's cool about this setup, it's for me, it's getting out of my comfort zone. It's, trying to, I guess, take this a little more serious because I think that's what our guests deserve, and for this podcast, I'm just grateful I get to have these awesome conversations. But really, it's just talking to people and kind of talking about why they're passionate about wrestling, and I hope it kind of comes out into our conversations. And I hope it inspires other people. And that's really what this is all about. And selfishly, this is for me to grow. It's for me to grow, not just as a wrestling coach and as a wrestler, but as a person. So thank you guys for tuning in, and I hope you guys enjoy the show. All right, dude. So first of all, I got to ask, so you're engaged, to be married.
Yep.
What was that like?
Dude, it was a long time coming, man. I'm like we've been together since high school. It's pretty awesome because we both kind of had similar backgrounds. We both went to Valencia, and I went over to Cal State, obviously, to wrestle, which is right down the road from where I lived. I want to say it's about an hour 15, and she went down to Cal Baptist, the opposite direction, a little bit more down south, which is hour and a half in the opposite direction. But it was kind of cool because we got to both do our own thing, kind of grow, with our own sports. She did stunt, I did wrestling. So it kind of made it easy on both of us to have a focus, to have a similar goal to kind of go after, especially with, her getting her business degree, I'm getting my business degree. She kind of one upped me a little bit on winning a couple national titles and getting her MBA as well. But it's cool, man. I'm super excited, to be engaged to her, and it's been nothing but blessings.
You guys have been together for so long.
Oh,
Like I remember, yeah, like she would come up and visit, and
yep.
you'd go down there a lot. Is that like maybe some pressure? Like, hey, if we're gonna go through this distance and be together for so long, we have to get married.
Oh, for sure. I mean, we were always planning on it too. I think that we just both have like, we both had our priorities. We kind of grew up doing similar stuff where it's like we both kind of talked about it and was like, hey, this is something that we want to accomplish before we, kind of tie the knot, get married. We wanted to get our degrees first, finish out our sports, focus on, the athletics, because we've both dedicated so much of our lives to, being student athletes. And I mean, I wouldn't say there was pressure or anything like that. I think once we both finished, it was kind of one of those things where we were both like, all right, it feels good, time's right. We're both living together now, so it just made sense.
And it's hard to gauge that timing, but I think it's like, because I'm sure your heart at multiple points before when you actually did it was like, all right, like now's the time.
Yeah.
When you first graduate, okay, now's the time. But
hmm
yeah, dude, I'm super excited for you. What was the like actually getting on a knee? Like, did you have anything planned? Like how did that go down?
Yeah, so I did it out in Tennessee, uh, out when we were visiting my family. And, I had the ring, a couple months before I even did it. I was just kind of holding on to it and, just different times, busyness, stuff like that. So I'm like, there's a couple moments where I'm, maybe I do it, and playing around with different ideas. But when we went out to Tennessee, I had the ring on me and it just kind of felt right. I was with my family down there. I took her out to this nice little farm slash inn and just beautiful views, lakes. And, I was like, man, this just feels right, this spot. And, there was a little bit of planning to it, but also it was kind of also a little bit of spur of the moment. And I just think that I knew no matter what, no matter where I did it, no matter how I asked, that she was going to be stoked about it. So that kind of took the pressure off of my shoulders a little bit. But obviously, did the whole getting down on one knee and asking her, and dude, she was stoked. I was stoked. I mean, it was a great moment for the both of us. So, and we just got to spend the rest of the weekend with my family. Got dinner, stuff like that. So it was cool. It was awesome.
I think one thing that I did with them, and I know a lot of guys do this, but they kind of have
Mhm.
like a pre-talk before the actual proposal, like, hey, like, what do you think?
Yeah.
What do you
What,
think
what are you
about this?
feeling? Yup. No, 100%, dude. I'm like, it's funny too, because I'm like, that's something that like I feel like most people would do because it's like obviously you wanna kind of get a feel, and obviously everyone's has their different relationships and different time frames that they've been together. And I think for me, man, I'm like, when you're going 5 plus years, 7 plus years, I'm like, it was kind of in my head where I was like, I think we were talking about it long before it even happened. So I knew, like, I was like, there was no pressure on my shoulders for that. So I'm like, I kind of knew it was ready to go. And it was more like, oh, you better do it. You better do it soon, And I was like, all right, I got you.
How involved in the planning are you right now?
Dude, if I'm being honest, man, she's super planner. I'm like, she's like, don't get me wrong, like I'm helping out too with the planning and the stuff like that, but like, dude, that is her game. Like she is all over it, her and her mom, are doing planning, stuff like that. We don't have anything too set. We haven't really told anybody, none of our friends. We're still working all the details out and stuff like that, but we're coming down to a close on what we'd like to do. So I mean, I definitely say that she's definitely more the planner than I am. I'm like, hey, I'm here, I'm involved, you need me, and obviously we're throwing our ideas around together. But I think that it's more of it's gonna be awesome for the both of us. But I think, growing up as, a girl, she's been dreaming about this moment, her whole life. So I think it's more about, making it right for her, because no matter what, I'm gonna be happy. I'm getting to marry the girl that I love. So it's a blessing no matter if, shoot, I could be anywhere and get married and I'm gonna be ecstatic. So it's cool. So I'm just letting her do her thing, and she's filling me in on everything, asking if it's all right. And I mean, all the boxes checked for me, so it's good to go.
Yeah, and I think the biggest thing is just you got to remember, it's like, dude, all the planning is important, but like the most important thing is that you guys get to share that moment together, and you guys are there together. And if it works out exactly how you planned it, great. If it doesn't, like, that's okay too. Like, the important thing is that you guys are there together. I
Oh,
think
for
like the
sure.
reception and stuff is, yeah, it's fun, but it's kind of like for everybody else, and for you to be able to enjoy that moment with other people. But like when it's you and Bree and whoever's doing your service, and you guys are making that promise, between each other and to God, like that's the most important part. So
Oh,
don't get too like stressed out or
yeah,
feel too
yeah.
much pressure or anything.
No, definitely. I agree 100%. Like pretty much you hit it spot on right there. I mean, really, I'm just, want to be focused on me and her and God. And, because that's what it's all about. We're making a covenant between each other, and, God is our witness. So, I mean, I think that just really, not going into the wedding thinking about, anybody else's opinions or anything like that. I'm more just kind of focused on her, focused on God, and just, I feel super blessed that, I'm able to, even get married and do these type of things and be able to live with her. So it's honestly awesome.
Are you guys gonna do it after wrestling season?
After wrestling,
Yeah,
I,
you're.
I'm assuming we're aiming for this next summer.
Yeah.
So that's late, like probably late summer. So wrestling will be done. It'll probably be before, the not this, coming season, but the following season after that. So it's that's kind of what we're aiming for. Give us a little bit of time to plan, to kind of tell all the peoples and stuff like that. But it's gonna be good.
Yeah, because you want to time it to where like you can just enjoy the wedding, and you're
Mhm.
not maybe like getting after it with the preseason stuff yet.
Oh yeah.
And then
And
after it's tough because it's like, you have freestyle and Greco and stuff like
Oh,
that.
dude,
So
you know how the wrestling goes, man. I'm
yeah.
like, it's a year round thing, dude. I'm like, honestly, there is no it's once you finish that folk style season, high school, college, whatever it is, you're going, most of the guys, high level are gonna be wrestling in the freestyle tournaments, doing the Greco, doing that international scene. So it's kind of one of those things where it's like you're going all the time, right? And I'm, even right now, I've been going, I've right after folk style season, I flew out to US Open with Slater, and Alejandro. I coached them up over there, and then we went to the World Team Trials out in Geneva, Ohio, and now Friday we're taking off to go out to Fargo, North Dakota. So it's a busy summer.
Yeah, you gotta stay busy, man. Like I think there's I know you have, a pretty great job where it's like you're able to kind of do that and coach.
Mm-hmm.
What's that been like, I guess, getting ready for Fargo?
Yeah, dude. I mean, it's pretty awesome because I've known Slater's family for a very long time. And dude, they're pretty much like family to me. And his dad, makes my schedule very easy. It's like I work for his company, and he obviously allows me to kind of make my work, around Slater, his schedule, his wrestling. So it's like it's almost a bit more than coaching. I'd say it's like mentoring, because I'm helping this kid with, his mindset, his dieting, his just everyday wrestling, his practices, I'm breaking down videos with him. So it's kind of like almost having like a little brother in a sense of, I'm with this kid 24/7. And honestly, the prep, going into Fargo, I'm feeling really good about it. He's actually down in Fresno right now. I want to say they have that Team California. I believe they have that mandatory camp that they do before. So he got some practice in yesterday and today with Team California, which will be great for him. Get him some different partners, and then he'll be back with me tomorrow. And we'll kind of put the finishing touches on this week. Get his weight dialed in, and I'm feeling good. And we've had a lot of tournaments to kind of use as a as what's the word I want to say, is some guidance, I guess you could say. We went out to US Open. He had a pretty good tournament. We wrestled some really top level opponents, and we got some good feedback from those matches. And then also him being, the young guy in the U20 group now, he's getting to see a little bit higher level of wrestling. He's dealing with some of these, when we went out to World Team Trials, I'm like, "Hey buddy, you're not the big fish in the pond anymore. You're coming into these brackets where, hey, Marcus Blaze is the number one guy in your group. He's wrestling some of the best guys on the senior level. So it's pretty awesome that he gets to get this experience in this summer, wrestle with some of the best kids in the country. And honestly, he's been responding well. He's hungry. He's excited. He loves wrestling. So it makes my job easy.
That I mean, that's probably the most important thing is that they love it, right? And I
Hmm.
think
Oh,
with
for
with
sure.
Slater, it's like watching Slater wrestle, dude. Like I'm sure we've talked about this before, but like I'm sure other people say it too. It's like you guys have such a very similar style, like a kind of a similar build too.
Hmm.
Is it make it's gotta make it a little bit easier maybe to kind of talk about different positions and stuff, but when it comes to the mental side, like what are some things that you feel like maybe not just Slater, but of all the guys that you coach, and what maybe are some things that you notice just because you've had that perspective before? What are some things that you feel like some young guys maybe could kind of do, take the pressure off a little bit and just have fun and
Hmm.
enjoy it?
Hmm. Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, Slater, and as Alejandro too, I have a lot of different kids, that wrestle and have different mindsets. But one of the biggest things I preach is, hey guys, like this is supposed to be fun. We started this sport because we love it, because we're having fun, because we want to become the best wrestlers that we can be. And that's what I kind of preach with my wrestlers in the room. It's like, hey guys, if we're going to show up here, let's have some fun. Let's have a good attitude. Let's work to score points, right? I like to make the wrestling exciting for the kids. I want them to be very active in their wrestling, looking to wrestle through positions. I don't like a lot of, kind of sitting and staring and, doing all that good stuff. I like to be active and just mentally, I tell them like, hey guys, no matter what, if you win, if you lose, your parents are still going to love you. Your friends are still going to be there. You're still going to go live your life. Life's going to move on. And I just like to kind of put that into their brains that, hey, man, like, you don't need to put that pressure on yourself, especially at a young age. I want these kids to really just focus on the wrestling itself, rather than, kind of getting in their head about, this or that, or who I'm going against, or cutting weight, or all these things that, yeah, they do play a factor and they do matter. But when I'm working with my team, I don't like to think about that stuff too much. I like to think about the wrestling at hand.
And that's, I mean, that's super important too. It's like thinking about the process and, focusing on doing the little things right. And I
Hmm.
think it's funny. It's like, kids have such a fear of, normally it's like fear of getting tired or fear of failure, fear of letting people down. It's like you only really fail, man, if you go out there and you do nothing and you win or lose. Like that's a failure. So I think it's just trying to get in their heads, just focus on scoring points, like focus on just fighting,
Yes.
focus on the effort part. And like, dude, people are going to care about you. People in your life that are your friends and your family, they're going to love you no matter what.
Yes, exactly, man. And I'm like, when you can kind of change their perspective on wrestling and frame it in a positive way, man, it creates a night and day difference in their training scenarios and their mental scenarios, and just the way they look at the sport as a whole. You want it to be a positive thing. And when you bring in a good culture like that, and you bring a lot of positive energy, and you have all of the guys on the same mindset and the same team, it makes it easier for everyone to kind of jump on that boat and, kind of build that success together.
And I think that togetherness is really important, especially being a Valencia High School alum. Like you get to
Yep.
coach at your high school with your old high school coach, Brian Peterson. Does
Yeah.
it make it a little bit easier? Like, I mean, I've talked to Brian enough to know like you guys have similar coaching philosophies. Does it just make
Mhm.
it easier, just kind of be in line and sync with each other?
Oh, for sure, man. I'm like, Brian. Well, I mean, Brian's been my coach since I've been 7 years old, and he's a guru. I'm like, check out his channel, Teach Me Grappling. He's a wizard with his jujitsu and also his wrestling technique too, man. I'm like, I take a lot of, my coaching philosophy and just my perspectives on, just wrestling and jujitsu and MMA, all that good stuff. A lot of it comes from his coaching and how he kind of framed me as a kid. And honestly, dude, like, he's just very easygoing, and I like to be around him. Like, he brings good energy. The kids love him at practice, and we have a very, good coaching staff around the board, right? We have good cops and we have bad cops too. I'd say me and Brian are on the good cop side, and then, some of our other coaches are the bad cops, which you need it both, right? Different kids respond to different personalities. So I'd say being under Brian, it makes things very easy for me. He kind of lets me do as I please as far as, the technique that I'm showing. And we collaborate on a lot of stuff. We talk, especially before season. Summer, it's a little bit of free for all where we're kind of doing a ton of wrestling. We're just getting the kids tougher, right? And then when the season starts to roll around for folk style, we start to, before it kind of rolls around, we start to talk about what our structure is going to be, what we're going to kind of preach, the fundamentals, the basics, what we want our kids to go over, what kind of systems we want them to get to during the year. And we like to kind of get on the same page, before that season starts. But dude, he's very easygoing. It makes my life easy. I can't complain.
And that's got to be cool too, because it obviously somebody that's been in your life for a long time. He understands how you wrestle. He understands who you are. It's the same thing both ways. And you guys get to be able to have those pre-season conversations. Like that's super important because
Hmm.
when you guys when everybody's on the same page on your coaching staff, it's like, all right, that's when real magic can happen.
Oh, for
This
sure.
is this is what this is like your third or fourth year coaching.
Yeah, yeah. So this is gonna be my third year coaching. So I started, and I wasn't planning on getting into coaching. As you know, Rhett kind of came to me out of the blue when Slater was going into high school, and man, they're driving far, and like they live in Santa Clarita, and they were just, they knew I graduated college, so they were like, hey man, like we'd love it if you could come coach. And I was a little hesitant at first because I didn't want to get into it, but the way that Rhett has just made my work schedule around the wrestling, and honestly, like I do really enjoy getting to help these kids and to coach them, and to kind of pass on this knowledge that where it's like you said, I went to Valencia, I didn't travel very far. I went to Cal State. So it's really cool getting to pass on this knowledge, whether it be, the technique or the mental stuff. I really enjoy seeing these kids grow, and not just in wrestling, but as people. I want to create good human beings for the world, and kind of show them the way of, where I did things right and I also did things wrong, and, help them take away what they will from it and grow as just people. So it's been cool.
I think that's yeah, it's pretty cool that you say that stuff. It's like it seems like you're there for the right reasons. And I don't know, it's got to be maybe a little bit different just because you're coaching at the high school that you went to, and it means more. And I'm sure it sounds different when you're talking to the kids about this kind of stuff. They hear it and they see you because you're somebody that has been through the program literally from the beginning and has done a lot of the things that these guys want to do in the sport too.
Oh, oh yeah, no, for sure. I'm like, it's really cool. I'm like getting to come back and just plop down right at my old high school and get to coach alongside my coach that's been around since I've been 7 years old. I'm like, dude, you can't ask for a better situation, and it's like they welcomed me with open arms. And dude, honestly, I love all the kids on the team. We got a lot of different personalities, and we got a lot of different levels of wrestling. I didn't come into a star-studded room of 5-star recruits, but man, can these kids work hard, and they persevere through a lot of different things. And honestly, they respond really well, because it's always interesting coaching in a place like Valencia, where it's like, man, you don't really have a lot of wrestling. When I got into high school, the first year that Valencia or any school in the Santa Clarita Valley had wrestling was my freshman year. There was no other programs, no nothing. And Brian played a super pivotal role in going through to the school district, getting it as a sport. And now I've kind of gotten to see the team grow, and it's like, man, we had almost, I want to say we had around 40 kids on the team last year, where compared to when I started it was not near that. And it's been awesome to kind of see the growth. And these kids are, they're not used to being around wrestling culture. It's like you go to a place like Bakersfield, man, and such a rich history of wrestling. I'm like, you got the Bakersfield High School, man. They've been around forever. You got Frontier, it's like you got South, you got all these schools that have had wrestling for so long. And everyone around town, even the people that don't wrestle or know about it, they all know that, oh, BHS, Cal State wrestling, like they know everything there is to know about it. Where it's like Valencia, it's like, you do wrestling, what's that? It's like these kids are like, they're like, you do wrestling, what is it, you wear those leotards and stuff? And it's like, it's almost like foreign, where it's like you go down to San Diego and Poway, and it's like super crazy wrestling culture, and you got all these big names and coaches helping out. So that has been the most interesting for me, I'd say, is like I'm helping some kids that have never even understood what the sport about it, but it also in turn, like, I think the kids fall in love with the sport even more, because they're like, oh my God, like this has been around, there's only been one youth program in the area, there hasn't been a lot of stuff. So it's like when these kids do find out about the wrestling, like we have a lot of like young freshmen that have never wrestled, and they're just like, oh dude, let's go. Like, this is awesome. So it is pretty cool getting to coach in Valencia.
I mean, that's probably the coolest thing and probably my most fun part of coaching is when you get kids that are in middle school, high school that haven't wrestled before. And
Hmm.
then you get to coach them up, and then they've only been wrestling for a couple months and they go to their first competition. It's like a JV tournament. Because for a couple of reasons. For one, like I'm very competitive and I want to compete against the other coaches in town, like who's
Oh,
got the
for
best
sure.
first year wrestlers.
Yeah.
But I think it's kind of very similar. Like I hear college coaches talk about this. The guys that a lot of times weren't even starters are oftentimes the ones that go back and donate the most money back to the programs or provide the biggest services back to the programs. And I think it's very similar with the high school. Yeah, we have a lot of guys that have had success at Frontier. But it's really cool when the guys that maybe broke through the lineup their junior or senior year or made it to the state tournament their senior year, like those when those guys come back and they're watching dual meets and like they show up at our fundraisers and they're, we have like a group chat now with all of our alumni. So like that's really cool
Oh,
to
dude.
talk about with them how the team and the program kind of changed their life.
Oh, 100%, man. It's like it's that wrestling culture, man. It's like there's man, there's something about wrestling or these combat sports where it creates that culture and that love, because when you have to do something as hard as wrestling, man, whether you make it to the top or you're an All American or you're NCAA qualifier or you state medalist or not a state medalist, like just to even step your foot out on that line, even at the JV level, man, it takes some balls. You're literally going out there to compete against another guy that is trying to forcibly freaking, pin you or whatever it might be, score points on you. And it's like, I think that's what really brings it out of these kids because they know it's like you're putting your blood, sweat, and tears into this sport, and it's like you're gonna do everything you can to achieve the goals. And I think that a lot of the time it's not even so much about the outcome. It's more about the journey, the friends you make along the way, the lessons that you learn, the character, that gets kind of built into you as you go through this sport. And I think that, we see a lot of that, just like you're saying, like we even have guys that are, alumni just from coaching this 1 to 2 years past that they're still coming back into the room, that are graduated and they're wrestling with some of the younger guys that are, now juniors or seniors. And it's really cool to see that, it's a sport for everybody, man. It's not just a, oh, if you're the best guy or this or that. It's like, no, this sport, I think, man, if I could give out a message to everybody, it's like put your kid in a combat sport, wrestling, jujitsu, have him do something hard because man, is it gonna teach them some life lessons that they're gonna take with no matter what. I don't care about the results of their career, they're gonna get something great out of it.
Yeah, I think it teaches that discipline. It teaches just how to fight for something,
Oh
like
yeah.
how to work hard for something. Understand that, anything of value is something that's earned. Um, I think what's cool too about like Valencia's setup is you guys don't have a wrestling room on campus, right? It's off campus.
Yeah, off campus. It's about like I want to say it's 5 minutes away from the campus. So we got like we train at Peterson Grapplers, which is Brian's gym. We got like two big NCAA sized mats, which they're actually the mats that we have in the
No,
room.
hey, don't get yourself in trouble here. If you where these mats came from.
Oh, don't worry, don't worry. I'm like, I don't think I'm saying anything too bad, but these were the mats that were actually used to film the Anthony Robles movie. So Brian ended up buying them after the fact, and they're in our gym right now. And it's kind of cool because one side's like old Iowa scene mat or whatever, and then the other side's an NCAA, and then the other side of the other one is like a Penn State, and then you flip it over, it's NCAA. So it's pretty cool. I'm like, these kids are legitimately getting to wrestle on like some actual NCAA, mats that were used in the movie. So it's pretty badass.
That's cool that they made these mats specifically for the movie.
Hmm.
So it's basically a Hollywood prop.
Yeah, 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 pretty much. I'm like, I want to say even I'm not sure the year, maybe it was 2011 or something like that. I'm not sure the exact year of when it was, but they actually have that year. You know how they have the logos on the side of the mat where it's like, oh, 2011 NCAA championships, whatever. So it's like it's kind of got like those prop style logos and stuff from the movie. So I'm like, it's cool. I know all the kids when they come in, they're like, oh my god, like this is awesome.
I mean, that's something too. Like when you have kids that come in, and I don't know how involved you are with the youth club, but like when
Hmm.
people are bringing when their parents come in and they see, hey, this is not just uh, whatever, like a warehouse with random old mats thrown in there. It's like this looks like a professional setting, and like people are excited to come into Peterson Grapplers.
Oh yeah, no, definitely, man. I'm like, especially like all the parents, so we kind of have it set up where it's like our high school guys practice first, and our youth program kind of trickles in after the fact. So a lot of the parents and the kids will sit and they'll kind of get to watch the high school guys practice, and then a lot of the junior high kids like to try to hop in practice whenever they can, obviously when they're allowed to do that. But they're definitely like kind of like walking in, they're like, oh my god, look at this, look at these high school guys scrapping, and they get excited about the mats. And when we kind of run our match days and stuff like that, it gives that actual match like feel where it's like, hey, this is the same circle that, the Mitchell Messenbrinks or David Carr, all these guys, are wrestling at the highest level. And so it kind of gives them that extra kind of like feel like, oh shoot, this is the same mat that these guys are wrestling on. So it is a cool thing.
Yeah. How involved are you with the youth practice? Are you doing high school and club like kind of at the same time?
So typically stick with the high school guys. So I don't do too much with our youth program, but Brian actually is the guy that he runs our youth program. He's much better with the kids than like I am. I just say like, not that I'm bad with kids or anything. I just think that he's got a better attention span, for that, and it allows me to kind of focus with, because I'm dealing with Slater and Alejandro, and these guys have a little bit more complex, problems that they're kind of going through. And, so it allows me to kind of work with them. But as far as our youth program, I want to say, dude, even since I was in high school, we always had like guys, that were going through our feeder program for PG. And every couple of years, we'll have a couple good kids, or a couple decent guys that'll trickle in. So, I wouldn't say like we have a like super heavily like big program, but like there are times when we have a lot of, youth wrestlers on the mats doing it. And they're honestly, man, I'm like, they're ran like a boot camp over there. I'm like, because you know how kids are. I'm like, they're, high energy, like to play, do all that good stuff. But like Brian runs it really well for the youth, like they're learning a lot of the stuff that our wrestlers are learning. Like, and dude, sometimes like the kids that come from that youth program are already more well equipped than some of the guys that just come into high school. So it definitely is pretty awesome. But yeah, Brian takes care of the youth program right now. I'm pretty much just only dealing with the high school program, as far as summer. I'm pretty much the main coach during summer. And then once the folk style season comes around, that's when we kind of have our other coaches kind of trickle back in. We got Anton Callista, Patty Pearson, Brian, myself. We had my old teammate Corey who helped out a little bit last year. So once the season actually starts, we have our full staff. But as far as right now, I'm pretty much covering the high school, running them through whatever I kind of think. And if I'm being honest, we do a lot of wrestling over the summer. I kind of treated very similar to my first year at Cal State. I'm like, when I first showed up to the room, I'm like, wait, we just put an hour on the clock and wrestle and try to beat the hell out of the guy. I
Yeah.
was like, what kind of place is this? I don't know if I like this, And so I like to emphasize, kind of getting that toughness in over the summer. And we do go over, we have technique days, but I do like to wrestle a lot because you know how it is when we get into the season and we're wrestling every single weekend and we're traveling and doing all that stuff, we typically, don't like to beat the guys up too much. We definitely always like to get our wrestling in, but we kind of ease off of it. And but as far as the youth program goes, they're going year round. They're constantly, they're like I said, dude, like they got a boot camp over there. I'm like, they're freaking they got like five coaches of their own. Brian's the head coach, obviously, and then we got a lot of helpers that are, kind of just giving some inspiration, helping the kids. But we one thing Brian's done for sure is he is, nailed it on the head with the youth kids. I'm like, he's always been able to produce, and hats off to him because I'm not the youth coach, but he seems to be able to freaking build stars. So it's awesome.
Well, I think it takes patience, but also I think too, like how I measure a good program is this a program where I'd want my kids to go and wrestle, and I think with Brian just kind of just kind of watch him from afar. And obviously, I talk to him all the time at kids tournaments because they bring kids up to Bakersfield all the time.
Yep.
He's got a really good temperament, and it seems like a really genuine person. And I
Yeah.
think it's funny you're talking about this summer's with CSUB. Because I mean, I don't remember you being necessarily super open in terms of what you were saying about your thoughts on the wrestling when you first came in.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I do remember down the line, I think it was different because it was in season. But
Mhm.
you were like, man, like, coaches are getting on me. We're having to run all the time. Like, like we're
Oh,
wrestling hard. I don't get it.
it.
But it is funny because you're doing a little bit of that now as a coach.
Oh, exactly. I think that it's like when you're a young kid and you just go into something that you did not expect, it's a little bit of a culture shock, and it's kind of goes into that Valencia, how we were talking, where it's like, dude, me and my buddies, when we were training in high school at Valencia, like, to be, I was a bit of an oblivious kid, I'd say. I was kind of not really like thinking like Slater, like, and Alejandro, they're thinking about colleges they want to go to. They're thinking of they're getting on the national big board and stuff like that. I'm just thinking about having fun with my friends on the weekends, growing up. And because none of my friends had that type of culture, and thank God for my parents, to hold me to a certain standard to, keep me in it. But I think that like coming out of Valencia where it's like, dude, we're playing tag at practice and we're messing around and we're kind of just doing as we please. And I was getting away off of athleticism at that point, and I kind of knew what hard practices were because I went to Titan Mercury a lot, in high school. And I think that having that 2 to 3 times a week was what put me over the edge when I kind of got to college. I was like, oh, so this is what it's like. This is an everyday thing that we're doing. And I think that it was just such a shock, with the mix of running and lifting and, we're scrapping, the coach is saying, hey, you want an easy day, make your opponent quit. I'm like, what is going on? I'm like, this is crazy. My teammate is literally trying to kill me, but it was a good wake up call because it's like they would try to kill me and then after the fact it'd be like, man, that was a great scrap, that was really good. And I think that it was very hard for me to deal with at the beginning when I first came into the room. I didn't know how to necessarily handle it because I'd never been in any situations like that. I wasn't a very tough kid, and I think that having to adapt and adjust to these types of training like really opened up my eyes. And I think that just being a hard worker and knowing that I could compete with anybody and stuff, it kind of pushed me. I was like, man, well, this is going to be tough, but I chose to do this. And this is what I signed up for, and I'm here anyway. And I know that these coaches care about me, and I know that sometimes it might be a little bit of tough love, and I might not love it, but hey, like I'm gonna do the best that I can do, to just, not necessarily accomplish any somewhat goal, but to be the best that I could be, And once I kind of figured out that like, hey, it's never going to get easier, you just get tougher, and once I figured that out, you get to a certain point where it's like you finally see the sunrise, you're like, oh my god, yes, I'm here, I made it, and the sun starts to come up, right? And but it took a lot of very hard days, a lot of mental struggles, battles, just being a young kid and not understanding how the world worked yet. And it was good for me though. I'm like, that's what made me into the man that I am, and I wouldn't change any single thing in my career at all.
Well, plus two, like coming in and you're redshirting your freshman year and you're coming in and it's like it's different because you're don't necessarily have those competitions every week during the season like how you would in high school. So you have a little bit more downtime. And when I say downtime, it's like, okay, the starters are off and traveling and they're going competing in these different dual meets and you're home and you're still getting your training in, but it's kind of like, what am I training for? It's like you only get maybe 2 or 3 dates, of an open competition where you can go and compete, and kind of, hey, like this is the thing I'm kind of working for. But it's really none. It's that national tournament, it's the conference tournament, and that's if you're redshirting, that's it's like a
Yeah,
whole year and a
way.
half, down the line. So, um, when you said that you're not tough, it's like, okay, like I think what you're saying is it's like the week to week of having to show up and I'm wrestling Sean Nickel or I'm wrestling Eddie Flores or I'm wrestling Angelo and we're all scrapping with each other. And, yeah, it's just really hard. It's like
Oh,
you've done tough things before because in high school, like I think it was both your junior and senior year, you basically were wrestling with an injury, right?
oh,
So it's kind of maybe a different kind of tough.
yeah, yeah, man. I'm like, it definitely was a different type of tough. I just always was used to being a guy in the room in Valencia where it's like, I had kind of separated myself and like I didn't have a lot of, you know, like I don't want to say I didn't have a lot of teammates to push me. Like my teammates were great. They actually did push me, but like I didn't have another guy in the room that was working, towards like being a national champion or doing that. I think we were all kind of just doing it for fun at the time. And then when I got into a room like with the Shawn Nichols, like with Russell, Russell Rolfing, with freaking Dom Ducharme, I'm like, I'm looking at all you guys, who are older, and I'm like, holy smokes, not only do these guys work hard, but they want it just as much as I do too, So it was a little bit of shock where it's like, man, like for example, like Angelo and Lokahi and Eddie and all my boys Kalani, I'm like, I realized when I went in, I'm like, dude, coming off of my senior year, I'm like, dude, I lost to Angelo and Lokahi, and I'm like, and they're studs, I'm like, they're still studs to this day, they're tough sons of guns. And but I realized, I'm like, we're all around the same weight class. We're all gonna be competing for spots and stuff. Like, dude, I'm gonna have to separate myself in this room if I want to grow. If I want to be who I say I want to be, I'm gonna have to freaking put my toes down and freaking, dig into the mud and freaking start working. And I really just think that like, learning from like I remember one time you were telling me I was so stressed out, and this was, I want to say, my first year, and we had this week of just hell, every single morning. I remember we would do a 5 a.m. and then we got hit with another 5 a.m. And then we would just hope throughout the day that we just wouldn't see, or after the practice ended, that we wouldn't see another 5 a.m. text. 8 p.m. comes around, 5 a.m. And I remember one, like it had to have been after the third day of doing it. I was just broke me. I remember stressed out beyond belief. Like in hindsight, I'm looking back, I'm like, oh my God, why was I so like over the top? But I remember I told you, I was like, dude, like, I just can't do it, blah, blah, blah. And you told me, you're like, hey, man, listen, take a second, breathe. He's like, no matter what, you're going to have to show up on that track tomorrow at 5 a.m. And whatever's going to happen is going to happen. But the best thing that you could do for yourself is have a positive attitude and do the best that you could do. Because no matter what is going to happen, you're going to run on that track, right? And you might as well get the most out of this rather than fight it, And I remember after having that conversation, kind of sitting there in my room at night, and I was thinking about it, and I'm like, he's right. I'm like, dude, like he's been here, he's done that, like, like and look at, he's not even phased by this. I was like, maybe I should take his advice, and hey, I might not be able to compete or win these races, right? But I'm gonna push myself and I'm gonna get the most out of it. And that next morning, I remember Manny was like, man, you had the best run you've ever had, dude. You did great. And I remember it wasn't easy, it wasn't hard, but I was like, wow, like it was such a perspective shift for me where I was just like, oh my God, like how you look at things and how you frame things in your mind can really change, how how the results come out, and so I think that that was something that was pretty awesome early on in my career that kind of helped me shift my focus and shift my perspective on what type of wrestler I wanted to be and how I wanted to train.
There's that like time age quote where it's like, if you can't change your situation, like change your perspective.
Yeah.
And I heard Rob Cole was talking about, it's like you can always talk yourself into having a good day. Like you can always just force a smile or force it. And eventually you force it long enough and it's kind of your reality. But what's funny is like I was it maybe your redshirt year or was it your first year competing?
Perspective, dude, to be honest, I would say there was like two perspective shifts, right?
Yeah.
One of them was my first year, right? And then the not my first redshirt year. And then I remember going out my redshirt freshman year, right? And it's my first year in the lineup starting, and got some expectations and stuff, and I go out my first duel, and I have my first home duel and I beat Sammy Alvarez. And I remember I got my first win at Minnesota, at Manny's hometown, duel. So it was a cool experience. But I think that when I went through that first year, I've always been a guy that has been able to adapt during a season, and kind of get the best, out of it. And I remember going through my first year, and dude, my record was, I had just as much losses as I did wins. And that was like kind of shook me up, right? And it was one of those things where that was the COVID year too, actually, you know, or was that the COVID year?
That I think so. I graduated 2000, or I finished wrestling 2019. That next year was your first year wrestling, and that's when they got canceled.
Yes, yes. Okay, so it was so we did the whole season, but the NCAA's got canceled. So I did have a first full season, but I didn't even qualify for that tournament. I remember taking fourth at the Pac-12s that year and just being like, oh my God, like I'm not going to the national tournament. Like it would never even cross my mind that I wasn't, but I was losing to really good guys, having close matches. I had a couple good wins, against some ranked opponents, but I also didn't realize that, man, the toughness you have to get through a full collegiate season. It's a long grind, and it was something that I wasn't prepared for. And just the cutting weight each week, being young, not doing it properly, not having the proper nutrition, not having the proper sleeping schedule. And I remember going into that next year, and we had a long break, for COVID, right? They kind of cut us, and they were like, well, we don't know when we're going to see you guys again. We'll see you in about 2 weeks. 2 weeks turned into 6 months, and then it's going all the way until, I want to say, the rest of the teams, like Big Ten schools, all that good stuff, they got to start wrestling in December. That's when their season started, right? And this was following COVID, and we didn't get to start until February, January-ish, right around there. I want to say the very end of January, beginning of February was when we had our first duel with, it was a tri-duel with Stanford and Little Rock. And I remember losing to the Stanford kid, and I ended up winning against Paul Bianchi from Little Rock, and he was ranked at the time. And I remember it was so hard for me, and we had no training. And obviously, being at a Cal State, a California school, we had a little bit more stringency on, what we could and couldn't do, where we could train if we could not do something. So I really wasn't getting any training in, and I remember having a phone call with Coach Smith, and I was still shaken up from the year prior, not doing what I was supposed to do, not like, I was like, how am I losing to these guys, and having this hard of a time. And I remember like almost breaking down into tears, talking to Coach Smith and saying, man, coach, I'm not a loser. I can't do that again. I've never lost like that in my life. I've taken my lumps, but I've managed to come around. But man, I don't feel like I am where I'm supposed to be. I don't know if I could do this or if I want to do this. I have a freaking a little less than I want to say same month was Pac-12s, and I had 2 weeks after that dual meet to get ready for the Pac-12s. And I remember going into the conversation thinking, maybe I should give myself this year and, go to a different go to a, or not go to a, sorry, wait until the season was actually done, and like just wait, give myself a year of training and then get back. And Smith was like, hey man, look, I believe in you. You're a great wrestler. I know it's not the start of the season that you wanted, but you can do this. I believe in you. And he kind of gave me some different things put in my head. And I remember getting off the phone and thinking to myself, well, that's not how I envisioned that conversation going. And he kind of talked me into it. And I remember hanging up the phone and saying, well, here we are 2 weeks out from the Pac-12s, and it was kind of brought me back to the same moment that we talked about, that my first year in school was, hey man, you're gonna have to do this no matter what, so all you can do is get the best out of this opportunity, right? And so for the next 2 weeks I grit my teeth and I said, I'm gonna have the best practices every day that I show up, whether it's the warm up, whether it's the cool down, whether it's the drilling, whether it's the live, I am going to do the best that I can. And I kind of had this chip on my shoulder where it was like, screw this. All these kids have been wrestling for a couple months. They've been getting all this extra training in. I'm here and I only have 2 weeks of training until the Pac-12 tournament. And I find out that there's only one spot that goes to the national tournament because they're going off of last year's allocations and stuff. And I got Devon Turner, who's All-American. I got Mikhail McGee, who's an All-American. I got Paul Bianchi, who's a couple-time qualifier. I got the kid that I lost to from Stanford, right? And I was like, well, there's not going to be an easy way about this. Gonna freaking put my head down and go, And when I showed up to the tournament, I'm so lucky I had Steve Blythe that year, Coach Smith, talking me into it, and Steve got me prepared mentally as well. He trained with me, he helped me, prepare as best as possible. And I remember showing up and the nerves were there, I didn't feel any different, but I just knew that I was like, I'm just gonna fight. I'm just gonna fight Bakersfield grit. That's what the coaches preach. I'm gonna fight this whole tournament. And I remember stepping my toe on the mat, and I had a 1 point match with Bianchi 2 weeks before. And then I went out and ended up getting the 9-3 win, our first match, right? And then I move on to the semis. Same thing, got those nerves. I'm bending down before the match. My legs hurt. And I know that McGee's undefeated on the year. He's ranked top 3 in the country at the time. And I know I got to win this match because I'm not going to be given anything because I don't have anything to go off of accolades wise. And I was like, well, it's do or die right here. And gritted out a tough win in the semis, got that overtime win, and man, he's a tough wrestler, fast, strong. He's a very talented kid, and I think that beating him and getting that win was great for me, because I knew that I could do it. I was just like with all odds against me. I think it really proved to myself that man, with everything going against me, I can still beat the best guys in the country. And I ended up dropping a close match to Turner in the finals and went on to my first NCAA tournament. And, I think from that point on, my whole perspective, that's where that second shift came in. Everything shifted. I said, man, if I could do this on 2 weeks, right, and have not as much training as the rest of the kids in the country, I can do anything. And then I took that into the national tournament. I lost a close first match and then racked up some wins on the backside, and then I ended up losing in the blood round that year and took top 12. But like that's when everything changed for me. That's when my mindset changed about how I practice, how I sleep, how I eat. That's when I think I went from becoming a boy, into a little bit of becoming a man, and I wouldn't even consider myself a man, quote unquote, as of now. I think I'm still on that journey. I'm still learning. I'm still growing. But from where I was at, it was a great experience, and then I took that, through to the rest of my career.
Yeah, I mean, you never stop trying to become a man. It's like, yeah, I
Oh,
think
oh
you
yeah, for
are
sure.
a man. It's just you're always trying to redefine what it is to be a man and what it is to
Yeah.
be the best version of the man version of yourself. Like
Oh,
you're always trying to do that. But
yeah,
I think
for sure.
those moments that you're talking about, like like knowing you have to do this run tomorrow and it's just gonna suck. Like knowing that it's gonna happen no matter what, like whether you're feeling good about it or feeling bad about it, like that's a big part of growing up, and the part where it's like, dude, like I've had zero time to get ready for this tournament, or I've had time but not nearly as much as everybody else. And going through COVID and not being able to train the way that I want to train, and then still having to show up and having a great performance. Like that's what it means to be an adult. Like that's what it means to go through hard times. And it's always when you're going through hard times, you really figure out who you are and what you're about. And dude, like those are really important moments. And what's great about all this too is like you get to impart those moments now to your wrestlers,
Oh,
like you
for
get to
sure.
share this experience and you get to help other people with it, and that's pretty cool too, is that now, okay, I've done it, I've done my thing, and now I get to give back.
Oh, 100%, man. I'm like, all these things that I've learned, like even throughout my career, of course, we all have goals. I want to be I wanted to be on All American. I wanted to be a national champ, right? And hey, I ended up falling short on the goal. But man, the stuff that you take away on the chase to greatness is, like I wouldn't trade it for anything. People, always ask me, oh, do you wish you could have done this or wish I'm like, man, I don't wish anything to be different. I'm happy because God placed me where I needed to be and he gave me the lessons that I needed to learn. And a lot of the times when I look back at, oh, why didn't I accomplish this? Why didn't I? It doesn't have to do with anybody else or what they did wrong. It really has to do with me, right? I wasn't, maybe I wasn't buying into this, or maybe I was patting myself a little bit on the back too much or whatever. But it's like when you learn to, kind of swallow that ego, and it's like, hey, you are who you are and you're gonna achieve what you achieve. And when you can take the ups and the downs and the good and the bad and then pass that on to the wrestlers that you're going to be coaching, right? It's pretty awesome because I'm like, I get to kind of, hey, don't turn there. I did that. I tried that, man. That's not the answer, right? This is my best opinion. And hey, like sometimes you got to let your wrestlers fail too, like sometimes they don't want to take that advice or they don't want to do that, but all I can do is give my best input to my wrestlers, whether that be technique or mental. And, hey, if they want to take it, great. And if not, they're still going to learn either way. I'm like, whatever they do, it's like they're on their own journey. But, wrestling has been a huge, huge, huge part of my life. And even though, I'm done wrestling and, I'm kind of, coaching these kids and stuff, like I'm just grateful for the sport, man. I'm just grateful that the people that have been brought into my life, Coach Luke, Coach Steve, all of my boys, Russell and Dom, and, all of the older guys on the team, Kalani, Balmer, all those guys, like such great memories with them going through these tough runs in the morning and getting yelled at together and having to bond as boys. And, like it's something I wouldn't trade for the world. So, wrestling's just blessed my life. I'm praise God every day. I thank him, and just, it's also brought me so much closer to my faith, and who I want to be as a man. And, I'm just super blessed, overwhelmed with blessings.
Yeah, just don't forget that, man. Don't forget that. So before we get to the end here, this
Yeah.
camp. Okay, talk about
Yep.
this camp. So you have a camp coming up. What are the dates again?
Yes. So here, my screen might black out for a second. I
Wait,
got
hold
it
on.
here.
I have it on my phone. The
Yeah.
dates. I know it's after Fargo.
Yeah,
Um,
21st through the 25th. There we go. I got it right here. Yeah, so we're going 21st through the 25th, following week of Fargo. We got a couple different clinicians for each of the days, right? We got I want to say we got Jerry Abbas one of the days. We got my old teammate from Valencia, Trent Munoz, awesome wrestler, man. You want to talk about like an Austin DeSanto type of guy. He's a goer. He's just freaking all gas, no brakes. He wrestled for UNK, and UNK won a national title last year, Division Two. So he's going to be a great asset to the camp. The kids are going to be able to learn a lot of really good stuff from my boy Trent. And then we also got the man Mark Munoz, dude. He's been around since I've been a young kid, man. I wrestled against his son Trey. We kind of grew up wrestling against each other. We wrestled our sophomore year again at CIF, and all throughout the year. And Mark is just, dude, Mark is a freaking phenomenal guy, dude. I'm like, I know he's coaching out at Cal Baptist, but dude, like, I remember even when I was wrestling against his son, he's teaching me techniques and stuff before the tournament. He's helping me with stuff, and he's just a really down to earth guy, and just a great example of just a good human being, and great wrestler, great MMA fighter. I'm like, so he's gonna be one of the guys at camp. And I want to say it's George Moreno is gonna be on Friday. He's the last guy. He's a little bit older, so I don't know as much about him, but all I know is I want to say he hits a mean arm drag because he arm dragged the shit out of Brian when they were in high school. So I'm sure he's gonna be showing that arm drag. He's got some good stuff. Another phenomenal wrestler, and then I'm gonna be on the Thursday for the camp. So I'm blessed that I get to coach along all these studs. So it's gonna be a good camp. It's 5 days of some technique, some drills, some live wrestling, some fun. There'll be a different clinician each day. So I mean, I'm stoked about it. It's usually a great turnout every year. So I'm excited. I hope to see some of your guys down there and some of all the old Bakersfield. Hopefully some different Bakersfield guys down there too. I told old Albert, to send the boys our way too. So I'm
He's
excited.
coaching the girls. He's coaching BHS
Or
girls now. He's the girls head coach.
Oh heck yeah! I think I did see that, and I told him I was like, hey, I was like, you got any little kids? You got the girls, whoever. I'm like, send them our way. It's for all levels. I'm like, I'm sure there's gonna be adults going. There's gonna be little kids. There's gonna be middle school, high school. We just wanna pack the camp and have a lot of people. So there's a lot of partners out there, but it's gonna be fun, man.
Well, Chance, thank you so much for coming on and just talking about wrestling, dude. I always get fired up, man. Whenever I see wherever we're talking, I want to go do push-ups right now. So,
Oh, dude,
uh,
100%. I'm like, shit, freaking. I love talking to you too, man. I'm like, you're the man. Every time I get out there and get to Bakersfield and get to see you at all these tournaments every year, it's freaking the most fun. I'm like, it's good seeing you because I mean, hey, man, you're my old roommate. Freaking, it's always good to get to talk to the boys every once in a while. So, man, I'm just thankful that you had me on your podcast, dude. This has been awesome talking with you, and I really appreciate it, dude.
and whenever I talk to Chance, I just get super excited because he loves wrestling, and you can tell just from the way that he talks about it and the way that he's passionate, like that makes it super awesome. So thankful I was able to have him on, and thankful that you guys were able to tune in. If you haven't yet, hit that subscribe button on YouTube, Spotify, and then follow our social medias. We're really big on Instagram right now. It's kind of the one that we're trying to build. And we're always trying to get better, like one of the things I was talking about Chance after we stopped recording is, this setup is, it's obviously it's for me getting out of my comfort zone because I don't know. I don't like this stuff. Like I like the conversation, but why this is special, and I think why this podcast is cool is you get to have genuine conversations with people that are passionate about wrestling. Like that's why you want to do it, and that's why you want to tune in. I appreciate you guys for following along, and hopefully this setup, just like, hey, we're taking these conversations a little more serious. So appreciate you guys, and tune in next time. Later.